She controlled a $12 billion empire, sat at the top of every power list, and had never once lost a boardroom battle. But the night she met a single father defending her honor in front of people who treated her like a corporation instead of a woman, she started losing something she didn't know she still had. This is the story of what happens when the most powerful woman in the city meets the one man who sees straight through her, and what it costs them both. Drop your city in the comments and hit follow. Don't miss a single part. The elevator doors opened onto the 42nd floor of the Meridian Grand, and the first thing Logan Hayes noticed was how quiet it was for a room full of people who'd paid $10,000 a plate to be there. He wasn't supposed to be here at all. His company, Hargrove and Tillman Consulting, a mid-sized firm that managed data infrastructure for regional nonprofits, had sent him as a last-minute substitute when his supervisor, Derek, called in sick 3 hours before the event. Derek had shoved an envelope with Logan's name on it under the break room door sometime that afternoon, along with a post-it note that read, "Wear the gray suit, don't eat the fish." Logan had worn the gray suit. He wasn't sure about the fish yet. The Meridian Grand's ballroom was all glass and clean lines, the kind of space that made you feel like you'd wandered into a magazine spread. Circular tables dressed in white linen, centerpieces that looked like they cost more than Logan's monthly car payment, a string quartet in the far corner playing something he didn't recognize but felt was important to recognize. He grabbed a glass of water from a passing tray, not wine because he was driving, and because he'd already learned that events like this had a way of lasting until 10 o'clock when you had a 6-year-old at home with a babysitter who charged by the hour. His daughter Mia had made him promise to be home before she fell asleep. He had every intention of keeping that promise. Logan found his assigned seat at table 11, somewhere in the middle of the room, not close enough to the stage to matter, not far enough back to feel forgotten, and made small talk with a woman named Patricia, who worked in corporate philanthropy, and a man named Gerald who kept checking his phone and apologizing for it. The event was a benefit for the Crestwood Youth Foundation, a citywide initiative that funded after-school programs and community health clinics in underfunded neighborhoods. Logan had actually done consulting work for 2 of the foundation's partner organizations, so he wasn't completely out of his depth. He was reading the program when he first saw Sienna Blackwood. She walked in from a side entrance near the stage, flanked by 2 people who moved like security but were dressed like colleagues. The room didn't exactly stop. These were professionals, too polished to gawk. But there was a shift, a subtle reorientation, the way a room adjusts when someone enters who carries a different kind of gravity. Logan had seen her face before. You didn't follow business news, even casually, without knowing who Sienna Blackwood was. 30 years old. Founder and CEO of Blackwood Technologies, a company she'd started at 22 in a rented office space above a dry cleaner's in the Garment District. By 25, BT had contracts with 3 Fortune 500 companies. By 28, she had taken it public, and the IPO had been the most watched tech debut in 4 years. She was by any measurement extraordinary. In person, she was also clearly tired. It wasn't obvious, she'd been well trained to hide it, but Logan had spent enough time around people under pressure to recognize the signs. The way she scanned the room not with excitement but with calculation, looking for threats instead of friends, the slight tension around her jaw, the smile she deployed when someone approached her, real enough to pass but stopping just short of her eyes. She was wearing a dark navy dress, her hair pulled up, and she looked like exactly what she was, a woman who had dressed for armor. Logan watched her for about 30 seconds, then went back to his program. Dinner was served at 7:30. Logan ended up eating the fish. It was fine, actually, and spent most of the meal listening to Patricia explain the mechanics of grant reporting, which was more interesting than it sounded because Patricia had strong opinions about it and wasn't afraid to share them. The program started around 8:15. A foundation director gave a speech. A city councilwoman gave a shorter speech. Then there was a short video about the communities the foundation served, and Logan found himself actually moved by it. Not in a performed way, but in the specific way that happens when you recognize something real. He'd grown up 3 miles from Crestwood, different streets, same kind of neighborhood. After the video, the room broke into smaller clusters, the way it always does after a program ends and before anyone's ready to leave. Logan stepped away from his table to get another glass of water. and found himself standing near one of the room's back pillars, half watching the stage crew disassemble the podium. That was when he heard the laughter. Not warm laughter, the kind that belongs to people who are laughing at something. Three men in a loose circle near the hallway that led to the coat check. Late 40s, early 50s, the specific build of men who had been athletic once and had gradually replaced muscle with expensive tailoring. Logan didn't mean to listen. But they were about 10 feet away and not being quiet about it. Saying it's been 18 months since anyone's seen her with someone. 18 months. The one speaking had silver hair and a red pocket square. There's a rumor in the London office she's actually completely untouchable, another one said, and there was something unpleasant in his voice, something between admiration and contempt. You know what her assistant told me? She works through New Year's. Through it. Like it's a regular Tuesday. What kind of person does that? The third man, shorter, with a drink in each hand. I'll tell you what kind. Someone who has nothing else. You take away the company, what does she have? Nothing. No family, no, just the work. Red Pocket Square nodded slowly. She's going to wake up one day and realize she traded everything for a portfolio. You watch. Already woke up, probably, the man with 2 drinks said. That's why she looks like that. All three of them looked towards somewhere across the room, and Logan followed their gaze without meaning to. Sienna Blackwood was standing about 20 feet away, talking to the foundation director. She looked composed and present and completely unaware she was being discussed like a case study. Logan set down his water glass. He didn't have a plan. He wasn't the kind of person who made plans in moments like this. He was more the kind of person who started moving and figured out the reasoning after the fact. He knew that about himself. Mia called it his just because instinct, the way he sometimes did things without a clear explanation except that they felt right. He walked toward the 3 men. Hey, he said. Just that. Not aggressive, not loud, just present enough that all 3 of them turned. Red Pocket Square looked at him with the mild confusion of a person who couldn't immediately place him in the hierarchy. Yes? I caught some of what you were saying. Logan kept his voice even. About Ms. Blackwood. A pause. The man with 2 drinks shifted his weight. Just conversation. Sure, Logan said. Just felt like something you'd want to know. Sound carries in these rooms. He glanced toward Sienna, then back. Especially to the person you're talking about. That wasn't true. Sienna hadn't heard them. She was too far away, too absorbed in the conversation she was having. But the possibility of it, the sudden image of her standing in earshot, landed visibly on all 3 faces. Red Pocket Square cleared his throat. We weren't saying anything. I know, Logan said. You were just talking. I got it. He picked up a fresh glass of water from a nearby tray, nodded once, and walked away. He didn't look back. He didn't look toward Sienna, either. He just returned to table 11 and sat down and discovered that his heart was beating faster than the situation probably warranted. Patricia looked at him. Everything okay? Yeah, he said. Fine. Bam. He nearly made it out without incident. The program had ended, the room was thinning, and Logan had successfully said his goodbyes, retrieved his coat, and was crossing the lobby toward the elevator bank when someone said his name. He turned. Sienna Blackwood was standing 3 feet away, and she was alone. No security flanking her now, no assistant, nothing. She'd clearly broken away from the remaining crowd with some deliberate effort, and she had the slightly tense look of a person who had rehearsed what to say and was now not sure it was right. Logan Hayes, she said again, more slowly, like she was confirming it. From Hargrove and Tillman. You did the data infrastructure audit for Crestwood's partner clinics last spring. He stared at her. Yeah. I looked at your name tag. That's... okay. A brief silence. She pressed her lips together slightly, the way people do when they're deciding whether to say the more honest thing. I heard what you said to those men, she said. I didn't hear the whole thing, but I saw it. Logan processed that. I'm sorry if it... No. She said it quickly, then seemed to catch herself. I mean, don't apologize for that. Please. She looked at the middle distance for a moment. I'm trying to say thank you, and I'm realizing I don't do it very gracefully." Logan looked at her, really looked, the way you look at someone when you're not trying to figure out what they represent, but just trying to understand who they actually are. She was tired. She was trying. She had the specific vulnerability of someone who was used to being surrounded by people and was almost never alone and was, despite all of that, deeply lonely. He recognized it because he'd felt it himself. After his wife Dana died 4 years ago, he'd had plenty of people around him. His mother, his coworkers, Donna's family. And still the loneliness had been enormous and specific, the kind that lives in the gap between presence and actual understanding. "You don't have to thank me," he said. "I know I don't have to." She looked at him directly. "That's kind of the point." He almost smiled. She noticed. Something shifted in her expression, not relief exactly, but close to it. "Are you leaving?" she asked. "I have a daughter at home," he said. "She's 6. She made me promise to be back before she fell asleep." Whatever Sienna had expected him to say, it wasn't that. He could see it register. The recalibration, the small moment of genuine surprise. "How old is she?" "6. Her name's Mia." He checked his watch. "I'm already pushing it." Sienna nodded, and he could see her pulling something back. Some question she'd decided not to ask yet, or maybe just the recognition that the conversation had reached its natural edge. "It was good to meet you, Logan Hayes," she said, and then quieter, "Thank you." "Take care of yourself," he said. It came out simple and real, the way things do when you're not trying to impress anyone, and he saw it land somewhere unexpected in her expression. Then he got in the elevator and went home. Mia was still awake when he walked through the door at 9:47. She was supposed to be in bed, but she was sitting on the couch in her dinosaur pajamas with a picture book open in her lap. And when she heard his key in the lock, she looked up with the specific alertness of a child who had been fighting sleep for 20 minutes and had just barely lost. "You're late," she said. "A little. Mrs. Cantu said you'd be late." Mrs. Cantu knows everything. Mia considered this with the serious expression she deployed for important philosophical questions. "Did you eat?" "I did." "What?" "Fish." She made a face. "Was it okay?" "It was fine." He paid Mrs. Cantu, a retired teacher from the building who'd become something between a neighbor and a lifeline over the past 4 years, and carried Mia to her room and tucked her in with the specific competence of a parent who has done this 10,000 times. Her room was small and bright, covered in drawings she'd made at school, with a nightlight shaped like a crescent moon that threw soft shadows on the walls. He sat on the edge of her bed. "Dad," she said sleepily. "Yeah, Bug." "Was it a good event?" He thought about that. About the quiet ballroom, the 3 men in their expensive suits, the elevator lobby, and the woman who had thanked him like she wasn't quite sure how. "It was okay," he said. "Different than I expected." "Different good or different bad?" "I don't know yet," he said honestly. She accepted this and closed her eyes. He stayed until her breathing evened out, then got up quietly and went to the kitchen and stood at the counter for a while without doing anything in particular. The office where Logan worked was nothing like the Meridian Grand. Hargrove and Tillman occupied 2 floors of a commercial building on Pratt Street, the kind of place with industrial carpeting and fluorescent lighting and a coffee machine that had been broken for 3 months and kept getting fixed and breaking again. The work was real, and the people were decent, and Logan had been there for 6 years, long enough to know where everything was and who to avoid near the copier on Monday mornings. His official title was Senior Data Systems Analyst, which meant he spent most of his days building and maintaining the back-end infrastructure that let small nonprofit organizations actually function. Databases that tracked client services, reporting tools that satisfied grant requirements, systems that let a tiny staff of 3 or 4 people manage the kind of workload that would overwhelm most corporate teams. He was good at it. He knew he was good at it. His boss, a distracted but fair woman named Carol, said so approximately twice a year, which was her version of enthusiasm. The week after the gala, Logan's life returned to its usual shape. He dropped Mia at school at 7:50 and got to the office by 8:30. He worked until 5:15, picked Mia up from aftercare, made dinner, usually something from the rotation of 12 meals he'd been cooking for 4 years, helped her with homework, bathed her, read with her, put her to bed. On Tuesdays, he had a standing call with his mother in Cleveland. On Thursdays, Mia had soccer practice at the community center 2 blocks away. It was a life built almost entirely around need and function. It worked. He didn't waste time thinking of it as anything other than what it was. But on Friday of that week, Carol knocked on his office doorframe and said, "You've got a message." He looked up from his screen. "From who?" She held out a slip of paper like she wasn't sure what to do with it. "Blackwood Technologies. Someone named Amber Chen said she's Sienna Blackwood's assistant." Carol paused. "She wants to talk to you about a potential consultation project." Logan took the paper. He looked at the number. Carol waited. "Should I?" "No," he said. "I'll handle it." He called back that afternoon from his car during lunch. Amber Chen was professional and warm and explained the situation with practiced efficiency. Blackwood Technologies was in the early planning stages of a new community initiative, a partnership with several Crestwood area organizations to expand digital literacy programs. They were looking for someone with ground-level experience working with those organizations, someone who understood the actual infrastructure needs, not just the theoretical ones. "Ms. Blackwood reviewed your firm's work with the partner clinics," Amber said. "She was impressed by the practicality of it." Logan said, "This is a legitimate project, not just, this isn't because of the Gala?" A pause. "I'm not sure I understand the question." "I met Ms. Blackwood briefly at the Crestwood Gala," he said. "I want to make sure this is a professional inquiry." Another pause, shorter. "The initiative has been in planning for several months," Amber said carefully. "Ms. Blackwood identified your firm's work independently, but I can't tell you the two things are completely unrelated because that wouldn't be accurate." He appreciated the honesty. "Okay," he said. "Send me the project brief. I'll take a look." The brief was thorough and serious. Blackwood Technologies was proposing to fund a 2-year digital access program across 8 Crestwood organizations: community health clinics, after-school programs, a public library branch, and a workforce development center. The initiative would cover hardware, software licensing, connectivity infrastructure, and staff training. The consulting scope was substantial: needs assessment, system design, implementation support, and ongoing evaluation. It was easily the most significant project Hargrove and Tillman had been offered in 3 years. Logan brought it to Carol on Monday morning. She read through the brief twice, set it down, and looked at him with the expression she reserved for things she didn't entirely understand but was going to say yes to anyway. "This is real," she said. "It seems to be. They actually want us? Not one of the big firms?" The brief specifically mentions community-level experience. Carol tapped the document. "The budget on this..." "I know." She looked at him. "Is there something you're not telling me?" "I met Sienna Blackwood at the Gala," he said. "Briefly. She may have flagged us as a result, but the project itself is legitimate. I can verify that independently before we commit." Carol was quiet for a moment. Then, "Does this make you uncomfortable?" He considered the question honestly. "A little," he said, "but not for reasons that should change the answer." She pushed the brief back toward him. "Then take the meeting." The meeting was at Blackwood Technologies' main office on Harbor Boulevard, a converted warehouse space that had been redesigned into something that managed to feel both industrial and warm. Exposed brick, high ceilings, natural light from a row of clerestory windows that ran the length of the north wall. Logan arrived 7 minutes early and spent those minutes in the lobby trying not to feel like he was somewhere he didn't belong, which was a feeling he'd had before in rooms like this and had mostly learned to ignore. Sienna came in from a hallway door at exactly the meeting time, which he appreciated. She was dressed differently than the Gala. Dark slacks, a simple blouse, her hair down. She looked less armored, more present. She extended a hand. "Mr. Hayes, Miss Blackwood." They shook. Her grip was firm and quick. "Thank you for coming in," she said. "Thank you for the brief. It was well put together." She led him into a conference room, not the large glass-walled kind, a smaller one down the hall, with a round table and 4 chairs and a window that looked out over an internal courtyard where 2 people were having an outdoor meeting. She poured coffee from a carafe on the credenza. He took it. "I want to address what you asked Amber," she said. She sat down across from him, both hands around her mug. "You were right to ask. The project is real and was in development before the gala. But when I saw your name connected to the Crestwood Clinic work, I prioritized the connection. I didn't manufacture the need, but I didn't pretend you were one of 10 candidates either." She paused. "I thought you'd want to know that." Logan looked at her. "I do. Thank you." "Does it change whether you want to take the project?" He thought about it for a real moment, not a polite one. "No. The work matters. If you want it done right, I'm the better choice than a larger firm anyway. I know these organizations. I know their actual systems and their actual staff capacity. Someone parachuting in from outside wouldn't." Sienna nodded. "That's exactly what I thought." They spent the next 90 minutes going through the project structure. She was sharp, not in the way of someone performing intelligence, but in the way of someone who had genuinely done the reading and was asking questions that mattered. She pushed back twice on his preliminary thoughts about system architecture, and both times she was right. He found himself slightly surprised by this, and then slightly embarrassed by the surprise. When they finished, she walked him back through the main workspace. He noticed the way her staff watched her, not with fear, but with the specific attentiveness of people who respected someone and also weren't entirely sure what to expect from them. At the lobby, she paused. "How's your daughter?" she asked. It caught him off guard enough that he showed it. She's good. Thanks for asking." "What's her name again?" "Mia." "Mia." She said it like she was filing it somewhere. "She sounds important." "She's the most important thing," he said, and he wasn't trying to be charming or philosophical about it. It was just a fact, delivered as one. Sienna held the door for him, which was slightly formal and slightly unexpected, and he walked out into the afternoon light and got into his car and sat there for a minute before starting it. He wasn't sure what to make of any of it. He started the car and went to pick up Mia. The project kicked off 3 weeks later. Logan's first site visit was the Crestwood Community Health Clinic on Albemarle Avenue, a single-floor building that had been a hardware store sometime in the 1980s and still had the bones of it, the wide floor plan and the loading dock entrance in the back. He'd worked with their office manager, a woman named Denise, on the audit the previous spring, and she greeted him like the return of something reliable. "Tell me you're actually going to fix the intake system," she said before he'd even set his bag down. "I've been asking for 2 years." "Show me what's broken first," he said. She showed him. It was a mess. Not dramatically, but in the persistent, grinding way of a system that had been held together with workarounds for so long that the workarounds had become load-bearing. Logan spent 3 hours with her going through the workflows, asking questions, taking notes. He asked about what worked as much as what didn't. He asked about staff capacity. He asked about the patients and what their actual experience of the intake process was. He drove back to the Hargrove and Tillman office with 2 pages of notes and a clearer picture of what the project needed to actually accomplish versus what it looked like on paper. When he got to his desk, there was an email from Amber Chen with a project update and a secondary note. "Ms. Blackwood would like to do a site visit next Thursday, if your schedule allows. She wants to see the clinic directly." He wrote back, "That works. I'll let Denise know. Mob." Sienna arrived at the clinic on Thursday in a car without a logo on it, wearing clothes that were clearly chosen to not stand out, dark jeans, a plain jacket, and Logan watched her take in the space with the particular look of someone seeing a place for the first time that they've only known as an abstraction. He'd been here often enough to forget what it looked like from the outside. The cracked parking lot, the handmade signs in the window, the way the waiting room had been carefully made welcoming on a budget that didn't easily allow for it. Donated furniture, artwork from a local school, a corner with books and toys for children waiting while their parents were seen. "This is it?" she said, not dismissively, more like confirmation. "This is it," he said. Denise met them at the door and walked them through the clinic herself, which she did with a quiet pride that Logan recognized from every person he'd ever met who ran a small organization well and knew it and didn't get enough credit for it. Sienna asked good questions, Practical ones, not performative ones. She wanted to know how many patients they saw per week, what the most common bottlenecks were, what the staff most needed. She didn't give speeches. She took notes on her phone. In the back office, while Denise stepped out to answer a call, Sienna stood at the window looking out at the parking lot. "I grew up reading about places like this," she said. Not to him specifically, more to herself. In grant reports, impact assessments, I've funded probably 40 organizations that look like this one. "But you've never been to one," Logan said. She turned. "Is that a criticism?" "No." He meant it. "I'm just noting the difference." She held his gaze for a moment. "It is different," she said. "In person." "It always is." Denise came back and the conversation shifted back to logistics. But on the drive to the next site, Logan thought about the way Sienna had stood at that window. There was something in it, not guilt exactly, but the specific discomfort of someone recalibrating, realizing the gap between what you thought you understood and what was actually there. He knew that feeling too. They did site visits at 3 locations over the following 2 weeks. Each time Sienna met him there. Never the other way around, which he noticed. Never summoning him to her office, coming to where the work was. He'd expected her to participate less as the visits went on. He'd expected the initial curiosity to settle back into delegation. Instead, she engaged more, asked more specific questions, remembered things Denise had said at the first visit, and brought them up in context 3 weeks later. She started building a working knowledge of the organizations that went beyond the briefing documents. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, the edge between professional and personal started to blur, the way it sometimes does when 2 people spend enough time in close quarters doing something real. It wasn't dramatic, it was incremental. It was the way she laughed at something Logan said during a particularly frustrating meeting with an IT vendor. A short, unguarded sound that seemed to surprise her as much as him. It was the coffee she brought to the second site visit without being asked, remembering that he took it black. It was the Tuesday afternoon when they ran 15 minutes long, and she said, without any particular agenda, "How's Mia?" And the question landed with a naturalness that meant she'd thought to ask. He'd answered, she'd listened, she'd asked a follow-up question about Mia's soccer practice that showed she'd been paying attention to a detail he mentioned in passing 3 weeks earlier. He'd driven home that evening with the particular discomfort of someone who is recognizing something true and isn't sure what to do with it. It was Mia who forced the issue, the way children do. On a Friday afternoon, Logan picked Mia up from soccer practice, and they swung by the Albemarle Clinic because he needed to drop off a hardware spec for Denise. It took 5 minutes. Mia waited in the lobby, where she sat in one of the donated chairs and immediately picked up a picture book from the children's corner. On the way out, they ran into Sienna in the parking lot. She was arriving as they were leaving, tablets under one arm, coffee in the other hand, clearly not expecting to see them. Mia looked up. "Is that the lady from your work?" she asked Logan. She didn't modulate her volume for propriety. Sienna heard this and smiled. A real one, different from the Gala smile Logan had cataloged that first night. "I think so," she said, crouching slightly, and she looked at Mia directly, not in the practiced way of adults performing comfort with children, but actually. "You must be Mia." Mia's expression moved from assessment to acceptance in about 4 seconds. "You know my name. Your dad talks about you." Mia considered this. "What does he say?" "That you're the most important thing," Sienna said. Logan watched his daughter receive this information and decide it was satisfactory. "Okay," Mia said. And then, because she was 6 and had no concept of professional hierarchy, "Do you want to come to my soccer game? It's tomorrow." Logan opened his mouth to say something. Sienna spoke first. "What time?" And that was, though he wouldn't fully understand it until later, the moment where everything changed. She came. She sat in the bleachers of the community center's indoor field in jeans and a gray pullover, without a driver, without an assistant, without whatever armor she usually carried. She sat 2 seats down from Logan because Mia had directed her there, and she watched a group of 6-year-olds play something that bore only a conceptual resemblance to actual soccer. She yelled when Mia scored, not a polished cheer, a real one, the kind that comes out louder than you intended. Afterward, Mia got her juice box and a granola bar and climbed up to sit between them in the bleachers, and the three of them sat there while the field cleared and the parents and coaches packed up. Mia explained at length the strategic significance of her goal, which had been largely accidental but was remembered correctly in her version. Sienna listened to every word. Logan watched her from the corner of his eye. The focused attention she was giving a 6-year-old's account of an accidental soccer goal, and the specific softness around her eyes that wasn't performance. He thought about what those men had said at the gala. You take away the company, what does she have? He thought about the way she'd stood at the window in Denise's back office. He thought about the fact that she was here, on a Saturday morning, in a community center bleacher, listening to a story about a soccer goal. He didn't say any of this out loud, but something in him shifted, quiet and certain. Like a door somewhere that had been closed for a long time had opened just a crack and let in a single thread of light. He wasn't sure what to do with that yet. He reached over and took the second half of Mia's granola bar, which she'd been leaving untouched for 3 minutes. She squawked. He handed it back. Sienna pressed her lips together to keep from laughing and didn't entirely succeed. The field was empty now. The afternoon light came through the high windows and lay across the floor in long, flat rectangles. This was good, Sienna said, quietly. Not to him, not to Mia exactly. Just said. Yeah, Logan said. And he meant it more than she probably knew. The soccer game was not a turning point in any clean, cinematic sense. There was no moment of music, no sudden clarity. What happened was quieter and more stubborn than that. The kind of shift that doesn't announce itself but shows up later in the way you think about ordinary Tuesday afternoons. Sienna drove back to her apartment that Saturday with the windows down, which she almost never did, and didn't check her phone for 40 minutes, which she definitely never did. She made herself tea, stood at the floor-to-ceiling window that looked out over the harbor, and tried to work through the feeling lodged somewhere behind her sternum that she couldn't quite name. It wasn't happiness exactly. It was more like the memory of happiness. The recognition that you'd just been inside something real and were now back outside of it. She'd sat in a community center bleacher and listened to a 6-year-old explain soccer strategy for 20 minutes. She'd yelled at a goal scored by accident. She'd eaten half a granola bar that Mia had offered her with the solemn generosity of someone who considers food sharing a serious gesture. And she had felt, for the first time in longer than she could clearly remember, like a person instead of a function. She didn't call anyone about it. There was no one to call, really. Her inner circle was tight and built almost entirely around the company. Her COO, Marcus, her head of legal, Priya, 2 or 3 people who occupied the ambiguous space between colleague and trusted friend. She had a therapist she saw every 6 weeks or so when schedules allowed, which they often didn't. She had her mother in Seattle with whom she spoke on Sunday evenings in conversations that were warm but careful, both of them navigating the specific distance that had grown between a mother who worried and a daughter who'd stopped admitting to needing things. She thought about calling her mother that Saturday night. She didn't. Instead, she went to bed at 11, which was early for her, and lay there in the dark thinking about a man who packed a granola bar in his daughter's soccer bag and referred to her as the most important thing with the same tone other people used to describe the weather. She started looking for reasons. That was the honest way to think about what followed. Not that opportunity presented itself, but that Sienna manufactured it with the specific patience of someone who is used to making things happen and has decided to apply that skill to a situation it was never designed for. The community initiative gave her legitimate access, and she used it. She scheduled herself into project check-ins that Marcus could have handled. She asked for site visits when email updates would have sufficed. None of it was dishonest. The project was real and her engagement was genuine, but she was aware, in the quiet part of her mind she reserved for honest accounting, that proximity to Logan Hayes had become one of the things she was optimizing for. She was also aware that she wasn't sure what she expected from it. She wasn't someone who made impulsive decisions in her personal life because her personal life had been, for most of adulthood, largely theoretical. She worked. She traveled. She attended things she was expected to attend and left them as quickly as decency allowed. She had not been in anything resembling a relationship in 2.5 years, and the one before that had ended because the man, pleasant, successful, completely unsuited to her, had told her she made him feel like an item on her to-do list. She'd thought about that for a long time afterward. She wasn't sure he was wrong. Logan Hayes did not feel like an item on anyone's to-do list. He was deliberate and specific and slightly difficult in the way of people who have decided what they value and don't feel the need to apologize for it. He pushed back on her ideas during project meetings without the usual softening qualifiers that people in rooms with her tended to use. He said, "I disagree," without preamble. He said, "I don't think that's right," and then explained why. And twice he had been correct, and once she'd convinced him he wasn't, and they'd both moved forward without drama. He treated her like she was accountable for her thinking. She hadn't realized, until she experienced the alternative, how rarely that happened. The initiative was generating real results by early November. 3 of the 8 partner organizations had completed their systems assessments, and Logan's recommendations were already in early implementation at the clinic on Albemarle. Denise had sent Sienna a brief, unsentimental email that said, "The new intake workflow saved us 40 minutes today. Thank you." It was the most satisfying email Sienna had received in months. The project gave her something she hadn't known she was missing, a visible line between what she did and what happened in the world because of it. The normal scale of her work was too large for that. A product launch affected millions of users in ways that were real but invisible. A grant to the Crestwood Clinic meant that Denise had 40 extra minutes. She mentioned this to Logan during a check-in in early November, standing in the parking lot of the Workforce Development Center while he finished a note on his phone. It was cold enough to see their breath. "It's a different feedback loop," he said, not looking up. "Yeah. Big organizations lose that. The signal travels too far before it gets back to you." He finished the note and pocketed his phone. "That's why people like Denise run circles around firms 10 times their size. She knows what's working the same day it works." "I know that intellectually," Sienna said. "Knowing it and feeling it are different things." She looked at him. "When did you get wise?" He snorted. "I'm not wise. I'm just tired of systems that don't work." He pulled up his collar against the wind. "My wife used to say I was constitutionally unable to accept that something was broken and just leave it that way. Said it made me difficult to live with." He said it matter-of-factly, the way he said most things. But it was the first time he'd mentioned Dana without her prompting or asking. Sienna was careful. Was she wrong? A pause. "No," he said. "Not really." The wind moved between them, cold and indifferent. Somewhere in the middle distance, a delivery truck was backing up with that rhythmic mechanical beeping. The afternoon had the gray, diffuse quality of November light. "She sounds like she knew you pretty well," Sienna said. "Better than I did some days." He said it without self-pity, just as a fact. 4 years and I'm still finding things she was right about. Sienna didn't push further. She filed it away. Not to use later, just to hold. The specific weight of a man who had loved someone and lost her and was still, 4 years on, learning the shape of what that meant. "We should get back inside," Logan said. "I have one more thing to run through with the director." "Right," she said, and they went back inside. It was Mia who made the next thing happen. 3 weeks after the soccer game, Sienna was leaving the Albemarle clinic when she found Logan in the parking lot on the phone, speaking in a low, controlled voice that she recognized as the voice of a person trying not to show stress in front of someone who might be listening. She almost kept walking. She didn't. When he hung up, he stood there for a moment with his hand still around the phone, and she said, "Everything okay?" He looked up. He'd clearly forgotten she was there. "Mia's sick," he said. "She's at school. She has a fever." He ran a hand through his hair. "My usual pickup options aren't available, so Mrs. Cantu is at a doctor's appointment. My mom's in Cleveland. I have a call with the vendor at 4 that I can't move." "Go get her," Sienna said immediately. "The vendor call?" "I'll handle the vendor call. I know the project well enough." She did. "Go get your daughter." He looked at her with the specific expression of someone weighing the cost of accepting help. It lasted about 4 seconds. Then something in his posture shifted. Not surrender, just pragmatism. The call notes are in the shared drive folder, he said. Section 3 is the one they're going to push back on. I'll push back harder. He almost smiled. Okay. He was already moving toward his car. Thank you. Tell Mia I hope she feels better. He paused, half-turned. I will. Sienna handled the vendor call. She pushed back on Section 3. Afterward, she sent Logan a brief summary and felt the particular satisfaction of a thing done simply because it needed doing. He wrote back 2 hours later. Mia says to tell you she has your half of the granola bar from the soccer game and she's saving it. I don't know what that means, but she was very serious about it. Sienna read this sitting at her desk at 6 in the evening in an office that was quiet because everyone else had gone home, and she laughed, short and real, at her screen. She wrote back, "Tell her it means we have a deal." So, by December, Mia had decided that Sienna was her person. It happened the way these things happen with children, without negotiation or formal announcement, simply a gradual reclassification that became apparent only in retrospect. She started asking Logan about her directly. Is Sienna coming to the thing on Thursday? Does Sienna know about the snow? Can we invite Sienna for soup? The soup invitation had been during a particularly cold December evening when Logan had made chicken noodle because Mia had declared soup weather and Logan had agreed. He'd mentioned it to Sienna during a call about something else, not an invitation, just mentioned it, and Sienna had said, in a voice slightly different from her professional one, "That sounds really good, actually." "You can come," Logan said. He said it carefully, like he was checking the weight of the words as he released them. A beat. "Yeah? If you want. It's just soup." "I know what soup is." I know you know," he said, and there was something in his voice now too. A dryness that wasn't quite humor and wasn't quite nerves, but was somewhere in between. She came. She brought bread, because she'd asked Amber what you bring when someone invites you for soup, and Amber had said bread and also wine, and Sienna had gone with bread because Logan didn't drink during the week. The small apartment on Garfield Street was warm and a little cluttered in the specific way of homes where a child lives. Shoes near the door, a drawing half-finished on the kitchen table, Mia's backpack hanging off a chair like it had landed there, and neither of them had ever moved it. It felt like somewhere people actually lived. Mia greeted her at the door with a level of enthusiasm that she'd apparently been building since the soccer game and had been waiting for an outlet for. She gave Sienna the tour. "This is the kitchen. We eat here. That's Dad's office, except he calls it the study, but it's just a desk, and this is my room." With the comprehensive authority of an excellent real estate agent, Sienna followed her and asked questions and genuinely wanted the answers. Dinner was loud and impractical in the way meals with children always are, with interruptions and subject changes, and Mia explaining an entire subplot from a book she was reading that required considerable context before the point became clear. Logan corrected the record twice, gently, and Mia accepted the corrections with more grace than most adults. After dinner, Mia fell asleep on the couch mid-sentence, the way children do, and Logan carried her to her room. Sienna was washing the bowls when he came back to the kitchen. "You don't have to do that," he said. "I know." She kept washing. He leaned against the counter. They were quiet for a while. The specific quiet of two people who have stopped performing and are just existing in the same space. "She likes you," Logan said. "I like her." He watched her for a moment. "What about you? What do you actually want from this?" The directness of it made her still. She set a bowl on the drying rack. "I don't know exactly," she said. It came out honest and slightly exposed. "That's the true answer. I know what it feels like when I'm here, and it feels different from most things." "Different how?" She turned to look at him. "Less like I'm running something." The kitchen light was on. Outside, she could hear a car pass. Logan's face was serious and attentive, and she recognized in it the quality she'd noticed the very first night. The quality of someone who was actually listening, who wasn't building his response while she was still talking. "I'm going to tell you something," he said, "because I think you're someone who would rather know." "Okay." "I'm not easy to be around," he said. "I'm told I take things too seriously. I'm not good at letting things go. I have a 6-year-old daughter who is my entire world, which means she will always come first, always, without exception. I'm not looking for someone to complete something. I'm a complete thing already. I'm okay. He said the last sentence simply, without bravado. But I'm not looking for something easy. Sienna looked at him for a long moment. I'm not easy either, she said. I work too much. I control things. I don't ask for help. She paused. I'm working on it, but I'm not there yet. I know, he said. I know you know. His mouth pulled at one corner. It was the same exchange from the soup invitation, and they both heard the echo. Neither of them moved. Then Logan said, There's more soup. I know. He got 2 bowls. By January, the media had found something to notice. It started small. A gossip item on a business news aggregator, a photograph taken outside the Crestwood Workforce Development Center, Logan and Sienna standing in the parking lot with the easy proximity of people who know each other. The photo was grainy and inconclusive, but the caption was not. Blackwood's latest project, sources say CEO has new priorities in Crestwood. It was nothing. It was also not nothing. Sienna saw it at 6 in the morning and felt the familiar drop in her stomach. The specific nausea of watching something private become public before you figured out what it is yourself. Marcus called at 8:15. He was not alarmed. Marcus was constitutionally resistant to alarm. It was one of the things she valued most about him. But he was deliberate. It's small right now, he said. Just aggregators. But the quarterly earnings call is in 3 weeks, and if any of the major outlets pick it up between now and then, I know, she said. Do you want PR to get ahead of it? No. She said it without thinking, and then thought about it and said it again. No. A pause. Okay, just wanted you to know it's out there. I know it's out there. She called Logan after she hung up with Marcus. He answered on the second ring. He'd already seen it. How bad is it? He asked. Small for now. It might stay small. And if it doesn't? She was quiet for a moment. I don't know yet. He was quiet too, and she had the uncomfortable sense that he was calculating something she couldn't see. Does this cause problems for you? It might. With the board? Potentially. She kept her voice even. Not immediately, but the board has opinions. They have opinions about who you spend time with. They have opinions about public perception, she said, which is technically about business and practically about everything. A longer silence. Outside her window, the harbor was gray and heavy, the water the color of old pewter. Sienna, Logan said, and the way he said her name was different from the way he'd said it the past months. More careful, like he was aware of its weight. I need to ask you something directly. Okay? Am I a problem for you? Not in the project sense, in the other sense. She wanted to say no automatically, the way you do when someone gives you an easy out and you're tempted to take it. She didn't. Not yet, she said, but potentially yes. I want to be honest with you about that. He was quiet long enough that she thought he might be working out how to end the conversation. I appreciate that, he said finally. I know this is... I need to think, he said. Not cold, not dismissive, just honest. About Mia. About what this looks like if it becomes a bigger story. She's 6. She doesn't... I don't want her in anything. I understand. I'll call you, he said. Okay. He didn't call that day. He called the next morning, early, when she was already at her desk. I talked to Mia last night, he said. Not about what had happened, obviously. About Sienna in general, carefully and age-appropriately, the way a parent takes the temperature of something before it gets complicated. And, Sienna said, she asked if you were coming to her spring soccer tryout, he said. Sienna's chest did something complicated. She waited. I told her I'd ask you, Logan said. So I'm asking you. When is it? March 8th. I'll put it in my calendar. Another silence, softer than the earlier ones. This isn't going to be simple, he said. No. I'm not asking for simple. I know you're not, she said. And somehow that was enough, for now. It was enough that they both knew what it wasn't, and were choosing it anyway. Not because it was easy or clean or free of consequence, but because the alternative, the careful distance they could choose instead, felt like a different and worse kind of loss. The media item faded after 4 days, absorbed into the endless churn of other stories. The project moved forward. Sienna rearranged 2 meetings to make room for a Saturday she didn't mark in the shared calendar as anything other than personal. Logan picked her up at 9 in the morning in his car, which smelled like Mia's soccer bag and old coffee. And Mia announced from the back seat that she had a new strategy this year involving lateral movement. Neither of the adults in the front looked at each other, but Sienna reached over and turned down the radio to hear it better. March came in cold and stayed that way. Mia did not make the competitive soccer team. She missed the cut by 1 slot, which the coach explained with the careful kindness of someone delivering news to a 6-year-old, and Mia held it together through the entire drive home and then cried in the kitchen while Logan made grilled cheese because she'd asked for it and then didn't want it. Sienna sat on the floor next to her, not beside her on a chair, not across the kitchen table. On the floor, back against the cabinet, the way you sit when someone small is crying and you want to be at their level. She didn't say it was going to be okay. She didn't say Mia would make it next year. She said, "That's a really bad feeling. I'm sorry." Mia wiped her face with her sleeve. "Did you ever not get something you wanted?" "All the time," Sienna said. "More than you'd think." "What did you do?" "Mostly I worked until I forgot about it," Sienna said, "which I'm told is not healthy." She paused. "Your way is probably better." Mia considered this. "What's my way?" "Crying first, then grilled cheese." Mia looked at the sandwich. "I still don't want it." "I know, but your dad made it, so you should probably eat some of it." Mia ate half of it. Logan caught Sienna's eye over the top of his daughter's head, and what passed between them was the specific wordless language of 2 people who have been in enough difficult moments together that they no longer need to translate. He mouthed, "Thank you." She looked away first. What she didn't tell Mia, what she didn't tell Logan either, not that night, was that her own week had been quietly brutal in a way she'd been managing alone. The board had not forgotten about the gossip item from January. It had faded from public view, but it had not faded from the attention of men like Richard Holt. Richard Holt was 63, silver-haired, and had been on the Blackwood Technologies board since the company's Series B round, when Sienna had been 24 and needed his network more than she needed to trust her instincts about people. He was smart in the way of someone who had been successful long enough that success had become a form of certainty. He sat on 4 boards. He had opinions about everything and delivered them with the measured pace of someone who had never been interrupted in a meeting and didn't expect to start now. He called her on a Tuesday morning in mid-March. "I'm going to be direct," he said, which in Sienna's experience meant he was going to say something he'd decided in advance but wanted credit for being honest about. "Please," she said. "There are 3 members of the board who are concerned. Not about the consulting project. The project is fine. About the optics of the personal connection. There's nothing public." "There's enough," he said. "We're heading into a significant product cycle. The Series D conversations are ongoing. Investors are watching everything, Sienna, not just the numbers. They're watching you." "I'm aware of what investors watch." A pause. He didn't like being interrupted, even lightly. "What I'm trying to say, and I want you to hear this as coming from someone who wants this company to succeed. Say it plainly, Richard." Another pause, shorter. "Distance yourself, at least through the close of the Series D, 6 months, maybe 8. Whatever this is, and I'm not asking what it is, let it wait." Sienna sat very still at her desk. Outside, the harbor was doing its March thing. Gray waves, fast clouds, the kind of light that couldn't decide if it was morning or afternoon. "I'll take that under advisement," she said. "Sienna?" "I heard you," she said. "I'll take it under advisement." She hung up. She sat there for 4 minutes, not moving. Then she opened her laptop and went back to work because that was the thing she knew how to do when everything else felt like it was tilting. She didn't call Logan. She didn't tell Marcus about the call, or Priya, or anyone. She held it inside the way she held most hard things. Alone, turning it over, looking for the angle that made it manageable. The problem was that it didn't have one. 2 weeks later, Mia got sick. It started as what looked like a bad cold. Fever, fatigue, the kind of persistent cough that wears a child down. Logan kept her home from school for 3 days, which became 5, which became a week. And the fever that should have broken by day 4 didn't break cleanly, cycling up and down in a pattern that the pediatrician said warranted further testing. Logan called Sienna on a Thursday afternoon, and she could hear in his voice the controlled flatness of a parent trying to stay functional while something frightened them. "They want to run some tests," he said. "Chest x-ray, some blood work. Probably nothing, but she's been sick long enough that they want to rule things out." "What things?" "Respiratory stuff, mostly." A pause. "Her lungs were a little... There was some inflammation they saw." Sienna was in a car on the way to a meeting. Logan. "It's probably viral. Dr. Mendez said that." She said probably. "Where are you right now?" "Children's General, waiting room. She's in with the tech for the x-ray." "I'm coming." "You have a..." "I'm coming," she said. She rerouted the car, called Marcus, and was in the waiting room at Children's General within 40 minutes. Logan was in a chair near the window, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. He looked up when she came in, and the expression on his face was something she filed away in the place where she kept things that were too important to look at directly in the moment. She sat down next to him. "You didn't have to," he said. "I know." They waited. The waiting room had the particular quality of all hospital waiting rooms. The layered anxiety of strangers, the television too loud in the corner, the smell of coffee from a machine down the hall. A child across the room was asleep in a woman's lap. Outside the window, a gray afternoon was becoming a gray early evening. "She asked for you," Logan said, quietly. "This morning, when she was feeling bad. She asked if you were coming today." Sienna didn't answer immediately. She was working hard to keep her face composed, which was something she was usually good at and was currently struggling with. "What did you tell her?" "I said I'd ask." "Tell her yes." He looked at her. Not the careful, measured look he sometimes used when he was thinking something through. This was unguarded. She didn't look away from it. The results took another hour. Dr. Mendez came out and sat across from them both without comment on the configuration. A man and a woman, side by side, both of them leaning forward, both of them waiting, and explained that the inflammation was consistent with a reactive airway response, not uncommon in children Mia's age after a significant viral illness. Not dangerous, well within normal parameters for treatment. She'd need an inhaler for the next few weeks, monitoring, a follow-up in a month. Treatable. Manageable. Not the thing Logan had been sitting with in his chest for the past 3 hours. He exhaled. Long and slow, the kind of exhale that carries things. Sienna put her hand on his arm, just briefly. She took it back. They went in to see Mia. The inhaler prescription was straightforward. What was not straightforward was what happened 2 days later. Sienna had a contact at Westfield Pediatric Pulmonology, Dr. Alan Reyes, one of the better pediatric respiratory specialists in the city, who typically had a 6-week wait for new patients. She knew him through a health initiative BT had funded 2 years prior. She called him on Friday afternoon, explained the situation in brief, and asked if he'd be willing to do a secondary consultation given the wait time. He agreed. He had a cancellation the following Tuesday. She arranged it through Amber, quietly, without fanfare. A consultation slot, covered through a charitable health access account she maintained at the clinic level for community initiative partners and their families. She thought of it as what it was, a practical use of access to get a child seen by the right person faster. She did not tell Logan. She had intended to tell him. She told herself she'd mention it when the appointment was confirmed, and then she told herself she'd tell him before Tuesday, and then somehow Tuesday arrived and she still hadn't said anything, and Amber had sent the appointment details directly to Dr. Mendez's office to coordinate the referral, and Logan found out on Monday evening. Dr. Mendez's office called to confirm the Tuesday appointment with Westfield Pulmonology, and Logan, who had not been told there was a Tuesday appointment, who had not requested a referral to Westfield, who had not asked anyone to make calls on his behalf, said he wasn't sure what they were calling about. The receptionist, apologetic and confused, mentioned that the referral had come through a third party, through a charitable account connected to a Ms. Sienna Blackwood. He called Sienna at 8:15 that night. She picked up on the first ring. You made a medical appointment for my daughter, he said. No build-up, no preamble. The flatness in his voice was different from the flatness at the hospital. This wasn't fear, it was something harder. Sienna was in her kitchen. She set down the glass she was holding. Yes. Without telling me. I was going to tell you. When? A silence that was too long. I should have told you sooner. I know that. You made a medical decision about my child, he said. You called a specialist, you arranged an appointment, you used your connections and your money, and you did it without saying a word to me. It was a consultation, Logan. Dr. Reyes is the best in the city, and there was a 6-week wait. That's not the point. I know. You went around me. His voice was controlled, but something under it was not. With my daughter. You made a call about her care, and you didn't tell me, and you paid for it, or arranged it without... I didn't ask you to do that. No, you didn't, she said. I did it because I could, and because I wanted her to have access to the right doctor, and because... She stopped. She was about to say because I care about her, and she could hear how it would land. Because you could, he said. Quiet. Not yelling. Worse than yelling. Logan? I've been doing this for 4 years, he said. By myself. I know what I can and can't access for her. I know the system. I know the wait lists. I know the options. I'm not helpless. I know you're not. Then why did you go around me like I was? She didn't answer immediately, and the silence filled with the specific charge of something true that she wasn't ready to say. I don't know, she said finally, which was the honest answer and the wrong one, because he could hear what it concealed. Yes, you do, he said. She pressed her hand flat against the kitchen counter. Outside her window, the city was lit up and indifferent. I acted on instinct, she said. I saw a problem, and I had a way to fix it, and I fixed it, without asking, without... She stopped again. That's what I do. That's what I've always done. And I'm telling you, that's not an excuse. I'm just trying to explain where it came from. I understand where it came from, he said. That doesn't make it okay. No, she said. It doesn't. Another silence, longer. She could hear him breathing. I need to think, he said. Okay. I'll take Mia to the appointment, he said, because she should see Dr. Reyes. That part you got right. But I need... He stopped. I need some time. The call ended. Sienna stood in her kitchen for a long time afterward. Not crying. She didn't cry easily. Another thing she'd been told was a problem. Just standing there with the hollow weight of something she'd broken through excessive competence, which was, she recognized, the most Sienna Blackwood possible way to break something. Mot. The board meeting was scheduled for the 4th Thursday in March. It was not a routine meeting. Marcus had warned her the week prior, in the careful way he warned her about things he knew would upset her, factually, without editorializing, giving her time to process before asking what she wanted to do. 3 board members, led by Richard Holt, had proposed an agenda item, a formal discussion of the company's public image strategy, with specific reference to the CEO's personal associations and their potential impact on the Series D. It was dressed in language about governance and fiduciary responsibility. What it was, stripped down, was a vote on whether to put formal pressure on Sienna about her private life. Priya had reviewed the documents and called Sienna afterward. They can't compel you, she said. You're the founder. Your share structure doesn't give them that authority, but if they push this to a formal resolution and it gets out, it'll be a story, Sienna said. It'll be a story, Priya confirmed. And the timing with the Series D, I know the timing. Do you want me to try to kill the agenda item before Thursday? Sienna thought about it. No, she said. Let them bring it. A pause. Sienna, I want to hear what they say when they have to say it in the room. She didn't sleep well the week before the meeting. She worked late every night, not because it helped, but because stillness made the calculus worse. She was running the numbers in a way that had nothing to do with spreadsheets, tallying what she was willing to lose against what she was willing to keep. trying to find the configuration that cost the least. The problem was that every configuration had the same problem. She couldn't separate the company from herself the way she used to. Not anymore. BT had been her entire identity for 8 years. She had built it from a desk above a dry cleaner's, had funded it on nothing, had fought for it in rooms where people underestimated her and counted on that underestimation, and fought anyway. It was hers in a way that went beyond the legal definitions. But somewhere in the past 6 months, in the community center bleachers, in the kitchen on Garfield Street, on the floor next to a 6-year-old who'd missed a soccer cut, she'd started to become someone whose identity was slightly larger than the company. And that person had different things to lose. She hadn't talked to Logan since the phone call. She'd sent him a brief message the day after, something functional about the project, and he'd responded in kind, and they'd maintained a professional surface over something that was not professional at all. She didn't push. She had promised herself she would not manage this situation the way she managed problems at work, which meant she was not allowed to engineer an outcome. She had to wait. She had almost no experience with waiting. She thought about what he'd said. "You went around me like I was helpless." She'd turned those words over every day since. The thing that made them hard wasn't that he was wrong. It was that she understood exactly where the impulse had come from, and the impulse had not been manipulation. It had been something she was less comfortable naming, something close to love, expressed in the only language she currently knew how to speak fluently. Control, action, problem solving, the translation of feeling into doing. She had a therapist appointment the week before the board meeting, 60 minutes with Dr. Park, who had a plant on her windowsill that Sienna had been watching grow for 3 years and had never commented on. "Walk me through what you did," Dr. Park said. Sienna walked her through it. "And what were you feeling when you made the call to Dr. Reyes?" Dr. Park asked. "I was scared," Sienna said, "for Mia, and I could fix one part of the scared feeling, so I fixed it. Without telling him." "Without telling him? Why?" A long pause. "Because if I told him, he might have said no." Dr. Park wrote something down. She had a way of doing that, writing things down at the specific moment when you'd said the real thing, so you couldn't miss it. "And if he said no," Dr. Park said, "I'd have had to live with not being able to help." She said it and heard it. "I'd have had to. Except that there were limits to what I could do for them." "Is accepting limits something you're comfortable with?" Sienna almost laughed. "No." "Why not?" She sat with the question longer than Dr. Park usually let silences go. "Because every time in my life I've accepted a limit," she said slowly, "it's turned into something I couldn't get back." Dr. Park let that sit in the room between them for a moment. Then, "That's worth thinking about." "I know," Sienna said. "I've been thinking about it." The board meeting was cold and formal in the way of all formal things that have an undercurrent of tension in them. 7 people around the table, good coffee, which nobody touched much. Richard Holt sat directly across from Sienna, which she'd expected. The agenda item came third, after the financials and before the product roadmap, which was its own message, important enough to address before the forward-looking work, not so important as to lead with it. Holt presented it without theater. He was too good at this for theater. He spoke about optics, about market sensitivity, about the perception gap between a founder who was romantically associated with, and here he paused, carefully choosing language, individuals outside the company's stakeholder community, and the seriousness required of a CEO in a Series D year. 2 other board members added supporting commentary. One of them used the phrase distraction management, which Sienna wrote down because she thought it was worth remembering as an example of how language can be used to make cruelty sound like policy. When they finished, the room was quiet. Sienna looked at each of them in turn, not aggressively, just fully. "I want to make sure I understand what you're asking," she said. "You're asking me to manage my personal life according to what makes the board comfortable. We're asking you to consider—" "I heard what you're asking," she said. "I want to be clear about what it is." Richard Holt's jaw was set. "Sienna, this is about the company's—" "The company is fine," she said. "The numbers are fine, the product roadmap is fine, the Series D conversations are progressing. Every material measure of this company's health is positive." She paused. So when you say this is about the company, I want to understand which part of the company a single photograph in a parking lot is currently threatening, because I have read everything you've sent me and I cannot find it. A silence. This isn't about the company, she said. It wasn't angry, it was just clear. This is about the fact that you have opinions about how I should live, and you've dressed those opinions up in governance language because you know you don't have the authority to say them plainly. She looked at Holt. I've known that since January, Richard. You could have just said it. The meeting went another 40 minutes. Nobody changed their position. Nobody capitulated. The vote on the formal resolution failed 3-2, with 2 abstentions, which was a technical win for Sienna, and everyone in the room knew it was also the beginning of something. She drove home alone. She sat in her car in the parking structure beneath her building for 10 minutes before she went up. Her phone showed a text from Logan. It had come in during the meeting, and she hadn't seen it yet. Mia saw Dr. Reyes today. He was good. She liked him. He said the inflammation is resolving and she can go back to soccer next week. A pause, then a second message, a few minutes later. Thank you for making the call. I was still angry about how it happened. I'm still working through that. But I'm glad she saw him. Sienna read it twice, then a third time. She wrote back, I'm glad she's okay. She started to type more, stopped, erased it, started again, erased again. She sent, I'm sorry, for real. Not just for the result, but for how I did it. 3 minutes passed. Then, I know. She sat with the phone in her lap in the dark of the parking garage. The concrete walls had that particular stillness that underground spaces have, the way the city becomes theoretical when you're below it. 2 more minutes. Then his name lit up her screen. Not a text, a call. She picked up. Hey, he said. Hey. A pause, but not an empty one. The kind that has something in it. How are you? He asked. She thought about the board meeting, the vote, Richard Holt's careful language, the drive home. She thought about sitting in the parking garage in the dark. It's been a day, she said. Yeah, he said. Me too. The phone call lasted 43 minutes. Logan didn't remember deciding to call her. He'd been sitting at the kitchen table after Mia went to bed, the house quiet in that particular way it got on hard evenings, and he'd been turning things over in his mind the way he always did when he was working through something. Methodically, from multiple angles, the same way he'd approach a broken system at work. Identify the failure point. Understand what caused it. Decide what to do next. The problem with applying that process to Sienna was that the failure point and the thing he valued most about her were the same thing. She'd gone around him because she was someone who saw a problem and solved it without waiting for permission. He'd fallen for her. And he was honest enough with himself now, alone in his kitchen at 9:40 at night, to use that word, precisely because she was that kind of person. Competent and direct and unafraid to act. The fact that it had landed on the wrong side of a line didn't erase what it came from. He'd called her anyway. And she'd picked up, and she'd sounded tired in a way that was different from her usual end-of-day tired. And when she said it's been a day, he'd heard something under it that made him put the rest of his calculation aside for the moment. They'd talked about Mia first. He told her about Dr. Reyes, how the man had the specific quality of pediatric specialists who were good with children, speaking to Mia directly rather than over her head, making the examination feel like a conversation rather than a procedure. Mia had asked him 3 questions, all of them practical, and he'd answered all 3 without condescension. She'd liked him immediately and said so on the way out, which was more than she said about most adults. She's going to be okay, Logan said. I know, Sienna said. And then, I was scared. When you told me she was at the hospital, I want you to know that the call to Reyes came from being scared, not from... I wasn't trying to manage you. I know you weren't. But I didn't give you the choice of being scared with me, she said. I just acted. That's the part I'm sorry about. He'd sat with that for a moment. You're going to do it again, he said. Not accusatory, just honest. A pause. Probably, she said. I'm working on it, but I'd be lying if I told you I had it fixed. I know. He'd almost smiled. I'm telling you now. If you do it again, I'm going to be upset again. That's not a threat. It's just, that's how this works. Okay, she said, and quietly, I can live with that. They talked after that about other things, the board meeting, which she described briefly and without self-pity, and the project, and something Mia had said about Dr. Reyes that was funny in a specifically 6-year-old way. By the time they hung up, it was after 11 and Logan had work in the morning, and neither of them had said anything definitive about what happened next. But something had shifted. Not back to where it was before, forward slightly into different and more complicated territory. The kind of territory you only reach after something breaks, and you decide to keep going anyway. April moved differently than March had. The tension from the board meeting didn't disappear. These things never do, they just redistribute. But it settled into a lower frequency, a background hum rather than an active alarm. Richard Holt remained cool and formal in email correspondence. 2 of the other 3 concerned board members were warmer than they'd been, which Sienna read as the specific recalibration of people who'd tested something and found it stronger than expected. Marcus told her the Series D conversations were progressing well. He said it with the careful optimism of someone who knew that good news in business was never unconditional, and Sienna heard the caveat in the spaces between the words. The media had mostly moved on. There had been one more item in early April, a longer piece in a business lifestyle publication, the kind that covered the intersection of wealth and personal life with a tone that tried to be thoughtful and usually wasn't. The article had described Sienna as surprisingly accessible for a woman of her position, and had mentioned Logan and Mia in 2 paragraphs that were factually thin but editorially pointed. It had called him a source close to Blackwood because the journalist couldn't confirm anything more specific, and the phrase was so imprecise as to be almost meaningless. Logan had read it and said, "A source close to Blackwood. That's what I am now." "It's terrible," Sienna said. "It's deeply terrible," he agreed. Mia, who had been in the room and was 6 and had therefore not been privy to the context, looked between them and said, "What's a source?" "Someone who talks too much," Logan said. She considered this. "Is that bad?" "Depends on what you say." Mia seemed satisfied with this and returned to her book, and Logan and Sienna looked at each other across the kitchen table. Her at his place, which had become a kind of default configuration over the past few weeks, an easiness that had arrived quietly and stayed. And whatever the moment was, it was theirs, and it was real. The community initiative hit a significant milestone in April. All 8 partner organizations had completed their systems assessments, and implementation was underway at 6 of them. The Workforce Development Center had already seen measurable outcomes: faster client intake, better reporting compliance, a reduction in the administrative burden that had been bleeding staff hours for 2 years. Logan presented the midpoint report to Sienna and Marcus in early April. It was a thorough document. He'd never done anything less, and the data in it was genuinely good. Real outcomes, not the kind manufactured to satisfy a grant report. Denise from the Albemarle Clinic had contributed a staff impact summary that was 2 paragraphs long and said more than most 10-page assessments. "This is excellent work," Marcus said, reading through it. He glanced at Sienna. "I told you." "You did," she said. Logan packed up his laptop with the slightly uncomfortable awareness that compliments from people in rooms like this still required an adjustment period. "We're on track to finish the implementation phase by June," he said. "I'll have the final report ready by end of July." "And then?" Marcus asked. Logan looked at him. "Then the project is done." Marcus made a note. There was nothing in his expression to suggest he meant anything by the question, but the word "done" sat in the air a moment longer than it needed to, and Sienna did not look up from the report she was holding. After Marcus left, she and Logan stood in the small conference room while the afternoon light moved across the table. "He didn't mean anything by it," she said. "I know. The project ending that's not the same as anything else ending." "I know that too." She looked at him. "You're going to make me say the actual thing, aren't you?" "I'm not making you do anything." "Logan." "I'm not," he said, and he meant it. He was leaning against the credenza with his arms crossed, not defensive, just settled into himself the way he always was, and his face had the patience of someone who had decided he was not going to fill a silence with noise just to make it easier. She set the report down. I want this to keep going, she said. What we have. I want it to be a real thing, not something we're managing around the project or the board or the press or any of it. He watched her. I know what that costs, she said. I'm aware of what it costs you, the visibility, what it could mean for Mia if this becomes a bigger story. I'm not asking you to take that on without thinking it through. She paused. But I'm asking. He was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, it was careful. 6 months ago, I would have said the gap between our lives was too wide to build across. And now? Now I think I was making a calculation about something I didn't fully understand yet. He met her eyes. Mia loves you. I trust my kid's instincts more than my own. That's a low bar, Sienna said. She's a very perceptive 6-year-old. Something loosened in Sienna's chest. So that's a yes? That's a yes, he said, with eyes open. Both of us. Both of us, she agreed. It wasn't romantic in the way movies make things romantic. There was no particular music to it. He didn't cross the room and kiss her. She didn't say something perfectly calibrated. She picked the report back up and he pulled out his laptop, and they spent another 20 minutes going through the implementation timeline because that was the work. And the work mattered, and they were both people who understood that love and responsibility were not opposites. But something was different when she left the building that afternoon. The city looked the same. Harbor Boulevard with its traffic and its gray water and its April clouds. But she moved through it differently, with the specific lightness of someone who has put down something heavy they'd been carrying so long they'd stopped noticing its weight. May arrived and the board reconvened. Richard Holt had not been idle in the interim. Sienna found out on a Tuesday afternoon when Priya called with the particular brevity she reserved for information that required immediate attention. 2 of the board members who had abstained in the March vote had shifted. Not publicly, not formally, but Priya had sources, and her sources said Holt had spent the past 6 weeks working the room. The May meeting agenda included a new item, a formal governance proposal that would require the CEO to submit to an independent review of any public-facing personal relationships that could affect company perception. The language was carefully constructed. It applied theoretically to any CEO, not specifically to Sienna, but its target was not ambiguous. If it passed, it would be the first time in the company's history that the board had placed a structural constraint on Sienna's personal life, and it would almost certainly become public. Governance filings were not private. Priya said, "Your vote count has changed. You might not be able to stop it." Sienna sat at her desk and looked at the harbor for a long time after the call. She called Logan that evening. She told him all of it. Not a version of it. All of it. The vote count, the governance proposal, the implications if it passed, the implications if she fought it and lost anyway. She told him because she had committed to not managing him, to not making decisions on his behalf without asking first, and this was a decision that affected him directly. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, the silence was about 10 seconds, and she could feel him thinking on the other end of it. "What do you want to do?" he asked. "I don't know yet." "What are your options?" "Fight it and probably lose. Don't fight it and comply. Or—" She stopped. "Or what?" She'd been sitting with the third option for 3 days and hadn't said it out loud yet because saying it out loud made it real. "Or use the meeting to do something they're not expecting," she said. "Restructure before they can constrain me. Change the governance framework first. Reduce their authority proactively before a vote happens." "Can you do that?" "It depends how fast I can move." She paused. "It would be disruptive. It would be a story. The Series D... What would it mean for the company long term?" She thought about it honestly. "Healthier," she said. "The current board structure gives them more authority over operational decisions than they should have. That's always been a problem. I built the company fast and I needed their capital, and I accepted terms that made sense at the time. So this thing they're trying to do to you, it's also just exposing a structural problem you've been sitting on." She blinked. "That's one way to look at it." "Is it wrong?" "No," she said slowly. "It's not wrong." He was quiet again. Then, "I'm not going to tell you what to do. This is your company, your life's work. I have opinions, and you can have them, but the decision is yours. What are your opinions? A pause. I think the version of you who built this company from a desk above a dry cleaner's at 22 would not recognize the version of you who lets a board tell her what her personal life can look like. Sienna absorbed that. I also think, he said, that whatever you decide, I'm not going anywhere. I want you to know that separately from the decision. I'm not a variable you need to solve for. She pressed her fingers to her eyes. She would not describe what happened to her face in that moment as crying because it wasn't quite, but it was in the neighborhood. Logan, she said. Yeah. You're going to have to stop doing that. Doing what? Saying the exact right thing. It's very inconvenient. He laughed, short and real, and she felt it like something warming. I'll work on being more aggravating, he said. She'd worked through the weekend. Priya worked with her. 2 outside governance consultants worked with her. Marcus, who she finally briefed in full, worked with her with the steady and somewhat relieved air of someone who had suspected the full picture for months and was glad to finally be inside it. What they built over 4 days was a comprehensive restructuring proposal, a new governance framework that formally separated board oversight of business operations from any authority over the CEO's personal conduct. It drew on precedent from 3 comparable companies, included a revised shareholder agreement, and proposed a restructured board composition that reduced the block Holt had cultivated. It was technically sound and strategically aggressive, and it would not make everyone happy. It might accelerate the Series D timeline, Priya said, reviewing the final version on Sunday night. Investors who were waiting to see how this shook out will have clarity. Or it'll spook them, Marcus said. Either way, we'll know, Sienna said. The morning of the board meeting, Logan sent her a text at 6:45. Just, you've got this. And then, a minute later, Mia wants me to tell you she's wearing her lucky socks today. She said to tell you even though she's not sure they work over distance. Sienna read it in the car on the way to the office and held her phone in her lap the rest of the drive. The meeting room on the executive floor had floor-to-ceiling windows on one side that faced east, and on May mornings the light came in at an angle that hit the table and turned it white. Sienna had always liked that about the room. It made things visible. She waited until the preliminary items were cleared, the financials, the product update, before she spoke. Before we get to the item Richard has submitted, she said, I have a governance proposal of my own. Holt looked up. She distributed the documents. Amber had them on tablets at each seat before anyone had to ask. Sienna gave the room 60 seconds to read the executive summary. I've been thinking about the board's concerns, she said, not about my personal life. I'm not going to address that as a legitimate governance matter, because it isn't one, and I think when we read these proposals carefully in a few minutes, we'll all agree that what's been presented is outside the scope of the board's appropriate authority. She kept her voice even, not cold, not aggressive, clear. But the concerns about perception and accountability that have been raised, those are legitimate in a different sense. They've exposed something I've been aware of for a while and have been slow to fix. The current governance structure gives this board more operational latitude than a healthy company should have at this stage. That's on me. I accepted those terms when I needed your capital, and I didn't update them when the balance shifted, so I'm updating them now. Holt set his tablet down. Sienna, this is a significant structural proposal. You can't expect the board to... I expect the board to read it carefully and engage with it in good faith, she said, which is the same thing I'd ask in any other governance discussion. She looked at him steadily. The proposal addresses the company's long-term board structure. The item you submitted addresses my personal life. I'd like us to be clear about which one of those is actually about the company. The room was quiet. Not the hostile quiet of a meeting going wrong. The different kind. The quiet of people recalibrating, reassessing the terrain, recognizing that the ground had shifted in the night and they were walking on something new. One of the board members, Elaine Cho, early 60s, the one member who had never joined Holt's coalition, said, I'd like time to review the full proposal before any discussion. Of course, Sienna said, I'd expect nothing less. Holt's item was tabled, not voted down. Tabled, pending review of Sienna's proposal, which was a smaller victory and a more durable one, because it changed the conversation rather than ending it. When the meeting closed, Sienna gathered her materials and was the first one out of the room. She made it to her office, closed the door, and sat at her desk with both hands flat on the surface and breathed. Marcus knocked 4 minutes later. "That was," he said, coming in, "the most Sienna Blackwood thing I have ever watched you do. Was it good or bad?" He sat down across from her. "It was correct," he said. "Whether it was good depends on the next 60 days. I can live with that." He looked at her for a moment. "Are you okay?" "Yes," she said, and meant it, which was not always the case when she said it. "I'm actually okay." Boom. She went to Logan's that evening. Not because she'd planned to, not because there was something specific to say. She just found herself driving in that direction after leaving the office, the city outside the windows in the particular state of a May evening, the light going golden and the streets carrying that just warm enough quality that makes everything feel slightly more possible than it did in winter. She texted from outside. "I'm outside. I don't have a plan. I just wanted to be here." 60 seconds passed. Then the door opened and Logan was there, Mia visible behind him in the hallway, in her pajamas already, holding a book. "It's 6:30, he said. "I know." He looked at her. Whatever he saw, it was enough. He stepped back from the door. She came inside. Mia looked up from her book with the total equanimity of a child for whom Sienna's presence had long since become unremarkable. "Did you eat?" she asked. "No," Sienna said. "Dad made pasta," Mia said. "There's extra." She returned to her book. Logan was already getting a bowl from the cabinet. "Sit down," he said over his shoulder. She sat at the kitchen table. The chair scraped against the linoleum. The overhead light was on and slightly too bright, the way kitchen lights always are. Mia's backpack was hanging off the chair across from her, same as it always was, unmoved. Logan set a bowl in front of her. Pasta with a sauce he'd made, simple and good-smelling. She ate without performing gratitude because they were past that. He sat across from her with his own bowl and they ate, and Mia read, and the kitchen was full of the particular sound of a regular evening. Utensils, page turns, the refrigerator doing its low mechanical hum. "How'd it go?" he asked. "I won a battle," she said. "War's still ongoing." He nodded. "Okay. The restructuring proposal is going to take weeks of negotiation." "Okay. I don't know what it's going to look like when it's done." "Okay," he said, a third time, and there was something in the repetition that was steady and intentional. He wasn't filling the space with reassurance. He was just present inside the uncertainty with her, which was different and better. Mia looked up from her book. "Is Sienna staying for bedtime story?" Logan looked at Sienna. The question was his, not Mia's. He was asking it through his daughter because he was someone who wanted to give her the choice without making it a moment. "If that's okay," Sienna said. "Obviously," Mia said, with the inflection of someone for whom the question was barely worth asking. She returned to her book. Sienna looked down at her pasta bowl. She'd built a $12 billion company. She'd sat in rooms with people who had tried in every civilized way to diminish her. And she'd stayed. She'd woken up at 4 a.m. for 8 years because there was always something that needed doing. And the thing that felt most real to her tonight was a bowl of pasta at a kitchen table in a small apartment on Garfield Street, and a 6-year-old who had asked a simple question and not waited for a complicated answer. Logan was watching her. "What?" she said. "Nothing," he said. "Just—" He stopped, and she saw him decide to say the true thing instead of the deflection. "You fit here," he said, "in case nobody's told you that." She looked at him for a long moment. "Nobody has," she said. He picked up his fork. "Well," he said, "now you know." The bedtime story that night was about a dragon who couldn't breathe fire. Mia had picked it herself from the shelf above her desk. A worn paperback with a cracked spine that she'd owned long enough that some of the pages had soft corners from repeated reading. Logan sat on the edge of her bed and read it, and Sienna sat in the small chair by the window that was meant for stuffed animals but was large enough for a person if the person didn't mind their knees being up. She didn't mind. The dragon in the story kept trying to do the thing everyone expected of him, the fire, the roaring, the terrorizing of villages, and kept failing at it. He was a dragon who turned out to be better at finding things, lost objects, missing people, things that had fallen through cracks. He had an extraordinary sense of smell, an extraordinary patience, and no fire at all. And by the end of the story, the kingdom had decided this was more useful than burning things down. Mia fell asleep before the last page. Logan closed the book and set it on the nightstand, and he and Sienna sat in the half-dark of the small room for a moment without moving, the way you do when a child is newly asleep and the stillness feels fragile. Then they got up quietly and went back to the kitchen. Logan poured 2 glasses of water, and they sat at the table, and Sienna told him the rest of what had happened at the board meeting. The part she'd summarized over pasta, the part she'd left out because Mia was in the room. She told him about Holt's face when she'd distributed the restructuring proposal. She told him about Elaine Cho asking for time to review it, and the specific quality of that request, the way it had been a small hand extended in good faith from across the room. "She's going to be an ally," Sienna said. "I underestimated her. I've been so focused on the opposition that I didn't properly map the support." "You had some," he said. "More than I thought." She turned the water glass in her hands. "That's the thing about a crisis. It does the sorting for you. You find out who actually has your back when the room gets uncomfortable." Logan was quiet for a moment. "What happens now with the proposal?" 60 days of negotiation, minimum. Some of them will push back hard on the composition changes. That's the piece that actually affects them, more than the conduct language. Nobody likes being told their authority is smaller than they thought. Even if it was always smaller than they thought. "Especially then," she said. He nodded. Outside, somewhere down the street, a dog was barking at something and then wasn't. "I have something to tell you," he said. He said it carefully, the way he said things when he'd been sitting with them for a while and had decided they were ready to be said. She looked at him. "I've been talking to some people," he said, "about a nonprofit. Not through Hargrove and Tillman, my own thing. A consulting resource for small community organizations that can't afford what a firm charges. Data infrastructure, systems design, the kind of work I've been doing, but structured as a service org instead of a commercial one." He paused. "I've been thinking about it for 2 years, and the Crestwood project clarified some things. Denise and the clinic, the workforce center, they need ongoing support. Not a one-time project. Someone embedded long enough to actually fix the systems and train the people who run them." Sienna listened without moving. "I have enough saved to fund 6 months of operating costs," he said. "I know some people who'd consult pro bono to start. I've talked to a lawyer about the structure." He looked at her directly. "I want to do it without your money. I want to be clear about that up front. Not because I'm proud about it in a stupid way, but because I need it to be mine. The way BT is yours." "I understand that," she said immediately. No hesitation. "I know you do." He held her gaze. "But I wanted to tell you because it changes things. If I leave Hargrove and Tillman, the income drops significantly for a while. I've run the numbers and it's manageable, but it's not comfortable." He paused. "I have Mia to think about, so I'm going in with eyes open." "What does Mia think?" He almost smiled. "I haven't explained the financial details to a 7-year-old, but she knows I've been thinking about something new. She said—" He stopped, and his expression shifted into the specific softness he only had when he was talking about his daughter. "She said, as long as I still pick her up from school, I can do whatever I want." Sienna looked at him. This man at his kitchen table in the apartment where he'd rebuilt his life from scratch, after losing someone he loved, who had raised a daughter alone and done it well, and built something real inside a life that had every reason to feel small and hadn't, who had let her in without losing himself in the process. She thought about the dragon in the story, the one who couldn't do the expected thing and turned out to be useful in a completely different way. She thought about the gala almost a year ago, the lobby, the elevator, the way he'd said, "Take care of yourself," with no agenda behind it. "It's a good idea," she said. "The nonprofit. It might fail. It might. I'm going to try anyway." "I know," she said. "That's how I know it's a good idea." He reached across the table and took her hand. Not dramatically. Just put his hand over hers where it rested on the table, the way you do with someone when words have reached their limit and presence is the more honest language. They sat like that for a while. Tit. June moved through its weeks with the particular momentum of things that are finally going the right direction. The governance negotiations were difficult and protracted and occasionally frustrating in the way of all processes that involve people defending positions they've already emotionally committed to. Richard Holt was strategic and persistent, conceding small points to protect larger ones, the way experienced board members do. Sienna was equally strategic, equally persistent, and had the advantage of having built the company whose structure they were negotiating. By the third week of June, a framework had emerged that neither side loved completely, which Priya said meant it was probably correct. The conduct review proposal was gone, struck entirely. That had been Sienna's non-negotiable, stated plainly in the first meeting and never moved from. The board composition changes were phased, 3 years rather than immediate, with specific triggers. The operational authority limits were codified in language that Priya said was the most clearly written governance document she'd seen from a company this size. Elaine Cho had been, as Sienna suspected, an ally. She'd pushed back twice on Holt's positions with the specific precision of someone who had been waiting for the right moment to use the influence she'd been quietly accumulating. Afterward, Sienna had taken her to lunch, just the two of them, a restaurant Elaine had suggested near the harbor, and spent 2 hours in a conversation that was the most honest board-level discussion she'd had in years. "You should have come to me sooner," Elaine said over coffee. "I know. I've been on this board for 4 years. You treat me like furniture." Sienna held the coffee mug and said, "You're right. I'm sorry." Elaine had looked at her with the measured patience of someone who was deciding whether the apology was real. "People who build things the way you built BT," she said, "tend to think they can hold everything by themselves. They can, for a long time. And then they can't." She paused. "You're at the can't yet." "I know," Sienna said. "Good," Elaine said, and reached for the sugar. The Series D closed in early July. It was not the largest raise in BT's history, but it was clean. Investors who understood the governance changes, who had done the reading, who were committing to a company with a more clearly defined structure rather than one built around the force of a single personality. Marcus sent Sienna a 3-word email when the documents were signed. "We did it." She was in a parking lot when she read it, the Albemarle Clinic parking lot, the same one she'd stood in with Logan 8 months ago, watching her own reflection in the wrong kind of understanding. She'd come by herself this time to drop off the final implementation documentation, the end of the formal project, the last deliverable. Denise met her at the door with the unsentimental directness she brought to everything. "You finished it," she said. "Logan did the heavy lifting." "He did," Denise agreed in the way of someone who believed in fair credit. "But you started it." She held the door. "Come in. I made coffee." Sienna sat in Denise's office, the small back room with the window that looked over the parking lot, and drank coffee and listened to Denise explain what the past 8 months had changed in the clinic's operations. Not abstracted impact, specific things, the intake process. The staff hours were covered. The fact that their grant reporting was now taking 3 days instead of 9, which meant the program manager could spend 6 more days a month actually running programs instead of documenting them. "It sounds small," Denise said. "It's not small," Sienna said. "No," Denise agreed. "It's not." She looked at Sienna directly. "How's Logan?" A beat. "He's good. He's starting something new." "I know. He told me." A pause. "He asked if we'd be a founding partner organization." Sienna looked up. "He didn't tell me that." "I said yes," Denise said simply. "Of course I said yes." She watched Sienna. "He's the kind of person who does what he says he'll do. You don't find that all the time." "No," Sienna said. "You don't." Denise looked at her over her coffee mug with the expression of someone who has seen enough of the world to recognize the things people don't say when they're sitting in other people's offices. "You know what the best thing about this project was?" she said. "Not the software, not the new systems." She tapped the desk. "It was watching you actually be here, not funding something from a distance. Here." Sienna looked at the window. The parking lot was ordinary and unglamorous, and she'd stood in it in the cold of November with her breath showing and Logan beside her, both of them figuring out what the work actually meant. I learned that late, she said. Better late, Denise said. Wow. Logan submitted his resignation to Hargrove and Tillman in the third week of July. Carol received it with more grace than he expected and less surprise. She read it, set it down, looked at him over her reading glasses. The nonprofit, she said. Yeah. I figured it was coming. Was it that obvious? You've been doing the work of someone who was building toward something for 6 months, she said. I could see it. She tapped the resignation letter. Is the Blackwood project the anchor client? No, he said. I'm structuring it so there's no single major funder. That was important to me. She nodded slowly. Smart. She looked at him. Are you scared? Yeah, he said. Some. Good, Carol said. People who aren't scared of things like this are usually not taking them seriously enough. She stood up and extended a hand. Come back and consult for us when you're established. We'll need the help. He shook her hand. Deal. He told Mia that evening after dinner. He'd made her favorite, spaghetti with the sauce she'd been requesting since she was 4, the one with the Italian sausage and the fresh basil that he grew in a pot on the kitchen windowsill that she occasionally overwatered on his behalf. She listened with the focused attention she deployed for important information. So you're not going to your regular job anymore, she said. Not after next month. Where will you work? Here, mostly, and at the places I'll be helping. Like Denise's clinic? Like that. She thought about this with a serious expression. Will we have enough money? He'd been prepared for this. Yes, he said. It'll be different for a while, but yes. I've been very careful about the numbers, Bug. Okay. She picked up her fork. Can I come sometimes? To the places you help? If they say it's okay. I want to, she said. I want to see what you do. He looked at his daughter. This person he'd been raising for 7 years, who had Dana's eyes and his stubbornness and a specific moral seriousness all her own, and felt the particular fullness that doesn't have a clean name, the kind that lives at the intersection of grief and gratitude and love and time. Okay, he said. She twirled spaghetti onto her fork with the concentration she always brought to technically demanding tasks. Is Sienna excited for you? She asked. Yeah, he said. She is. Good. Mia ate the spaghetti. She's good at being excited for things. Logan looked at his plate. Yeah, he said. She is. Tassem. Sienna had a habit she'd developed sometime in the fall of the previous year without noticing until it was already established. On Sunday mornings, when the week had been long and the city was still quiet, and there was no call she absolutely had to be on and no meeting she absolutely had to get to, she went to the Garfield Street apartment. She brought coffee because Logan made his in a French press, and she respected the effort but didn't entirely trust it before 9 a.m. And she arrived usually by 8:30, and they drank coffee in the kitchen while Mia slept in, and the apartment held the particular Sunday morning quality of a place that has no obligations for the next 2 hours. They talked, or they didn't. She brought her laptop sometimes and worked. He read the paper, actual print newspaper, because he'd kept the subscription since before Dana died and had never canceled it. Mia came out eventually in her pajamas, usually carrying a book or a drawing or some question she'd been developing since she woke up. And the morning became the three of them in the ordinary way that things become ordinary when they've happened enough times. Sienna had not understood before this year what ordinary meant as a form of abundance. She'd understood extraordinary. She'd built her life around it. Exceptional performance, exceptional outcomes, exceptional results. Ordinary had always felt like a concession, like something you settled for when you couldn't achieve better. She understood now that she'd had it backward. Ordinary was what you built extraordinary things for. It was the point. The quiet Sunday morning was not what you earned after the success. It was what the success was supposed to protect. She'd been protecting the wrong things. Well, in August, Logan officially launched the Crestwood Systems Collaborative. It was not a launch in the BT sense. No press release, no event, no coverage. It was a website, a formal nonprofit registration, a first cohort of 4 partner organizations, and a founding document that Logan had written himself over several evenings at the kitchen table while Mia did her summer reading at the other end. Sienna had read the founding document when he sent it to her. She'd read it twice. The language was his, direct and functional, no unnecessary flourish. But the intent underneath it was specific and clear in a way that made something catch in her throat. The goal of the Crestwood Systems Collaborative is not to modernize organizations. It is to make good people less burdened. Most small nonprofits are run by people who care deeply and are working at or beyond capacity. Technology and systems should reduce that burden, not add to it. We exist to translate technical knowledge into practical relief for the people doing the work. She'd written back, "This is exactly right." He'd written, "Coming from you, that means something." She'd sat with that for a minute, feeling the specific weight of being known well enough that a compliment from you carries particular meaning to someone. It was not a feeling she was used to. She was learning to let it land instead of deflecting it. Denise's clinic was the first partner. The Workforce Development Center was the second. By September, 2 more had joined through word of mouth, a youth mentorship program in the Crestwood area, and a food access nonprofit that operated 3 distribution sites across the city. Logan had 1 part-time assistant, a recent college graduate named Tim, who had the specific combination of technical aptitude and genuine warmth that the work required. It was small. It was real. It was his. He didn't talk about it constantly, which Sienna noticed and respected. He wasn't someone who needed external validation for the things he'd decided were right. He worked, and he reported results in the specific language of outcomes, shuts, not impressions, not optics, but things that happened because the work happened. Mia's soccer season started in September. She'd made the team this year, not the competitive travel team, the recreational one she'd tried for the spring before, but she'd made it with 2 spots to spare and came home from tryouts with the quiet dignity of someone who had worked for something and gotten it. "I practiced lateral movement all summer," she told Sienna on the phone that evening. Logan had handed her the phone without ceremony, his voice behind Mia's saying, "She wants to tell you herself." "I know," Sienna said. "I watched you practice." "You did?" "In the backyard, 3 Saturdays. A pause. "Dad said you were working." "I was working," Sienna said. "I can work and watch at the same time. I'm very talented." Mia laughed, a clear, unguarded sound, and Sienna sat at her desk in her office on Harbor Boulevard and let it fill the room. But the thing about grief, Logan had learned, is that it doesn't end. It changes shape. In the 4 years after Dana died, the grief had been many things: a weight, then a companion, then something he carried the way you carry a scar, not painfully, but always there, always part of the map of yourself. He'd made peace with it. He'd built a life inside it, around it. He'd become a father in the fullest sense, not just a parent by circumstance, but a person who had let the work of raising Mia become the center around which everything else orbited. What he hadn't expected was the specific guilt that came with loving someone new. It arrived in September, on Dana's birthday, which he'd always marked quietly. Not a production, just a day that he held differently than others. He made her favorite meal for dinner, a chicken dish her mother had taught her, and Mia helped because she always helped, and because she knew what the day was without being told. After Mia went to bed, he sat on the back step of the building in the September air and sat with it. Sienna texted at 9:30. Just thinking of you tonight. He stared at the message for a while. He hadn't told her specifically about the day. He'd mentioned once that Dana's birthday was in September and she'd remembered. He wrote back, "How'd you know? You went quiet this afternoon. You go quiet when something's heavy." He put the phone on his knee and looked at the dark strip of sky visible above the neighboring buildings. 2 stars, or possibly satellites. Hard to tell in the city. "I'm okay," he wrote. "It's complicated tonight." "I know, you don't have to explain." He thought about that, about how much of the past year had been, in various ways, her not requiring him to explain. Not demanding translation for things that existed in a register she hadn't been given access to. Just staying present inside the complicated parts without needing them to be resolved first. "She would have liked you," he wrote. He hadn't planned to write it. He sent it before he could reconsider. A longer pause this time. "That means everything," Sienna wrote. "I hope I would have been worthy of it." He sat on the step for another hour. Not sad exactly, or not only sad. The feeling was more layered than that. Grief and gratitude, and the particular disorientation of loving your life at the same moment you miss someone who was part of a previous version of it. He'd never tried to explain this to anyone. He wasn't sure he could. But Sienna had texted at 9:30 because she'd noticed he went quiet, and that was the kind of attention that didn't need explanation. It was just someone paying attention to you in the right way. He went inside, checked on Mia, and went to bed. October brought the first cold snap of the season and Mia's 7th birthday. She'd been planning it since August, with the comprehensive logistical focus she applied to anything she considered important. She wanted it in the backyard of the Garfield Street building, the small, concrete-paved outdoor space behind the building that was communal property but rarely used by anyone except Logan and Mia and Mrs. Cantu, who grew tomatoes in pots along the south wall and treated the harvest like a civic achievement. The guest list was specific. 4 friends from school, Mrs. Cantu, Logan's mother, who was coming from Cleveland, Logan's colleague turned friend James, and Sienna. Mia had presented this list to Logan as a finished document, not a draft for input. 7 is an important number, she told him. Why? It just is, she said, which was the answer she gave to questions she hadn't fully worked out the reasoning for yet. The morning of the birthday was clear and cold in the particular October way. Bright sky, that specific quality of autumn light that makes everything look slightly more defined than usual, edges sharper, colors more deliberate. Logan had been up since 6 setting things up, which mostly meant moving the folding table outside and putting up the banner Mia had designed herself in October-colored markers, and blowing up a quantity of balloons that she had selected with scientific precision. Not too many, she said, because too many looks like you're trying too hard. His mother arrived at 10, coming through the front door with her overnight bag and the specific energy she brought to events involving Mia, which was a slightly elevated version of her normal warmth. She hugged Logan for a moment longer than a regular hello, and he let her because he knew what it meant. She was taking the temperature of him, the way she'd always done, checking in through the physical contact rather than words. "You look good," she said, pulling back. "I'm good," he said, and meant it. She looked at him carefully. "Actually good, or telling your mother good?" "Actually." She studied his face for another second, then nodded, apparently satisfied. "I'll take it." She moved past him toward the kitchen. "Is Sienna coming?" At 11. His mother opened the refrigerator and took stock with the authority of a woman who intended to contribute to the food situation. "Tell me about her." "Mom, I've met her once at Christmas, and you spent the whole time making sure neither of us was left alone to actually talk." She closed the refrigerator. "Tell me about her." Logan leaned against the counter. He thought about what to say. Not the biography. His mother could have found that in any publication. The real version. "She's harder on herself than anyone else is on her," he said. "She's getting better at asking for help. She remembers things. Not in the strategy way, in the actual caring way. She sat on the kitchen floor next to Mia when Mia was upset about missing the soccer team." He paused. "She fits here. That's the thing I keep coming back to. She fits here." His mother was quiet for a moment. "Your dad fit everywhere too," she said. It was not a comparison exactly. It was more of a recognition. "I never told him that enough." "He knew," Logan said. "Maybe," she said. "But you should say it anyway, when you know something like that." Sienna arrived at 11, which was when she said she'd arrived because she was constitutionally punctual. She came through the side gate that led directly to the backyard and found Mia there before she found Logan, which meant Mia was the first person to assess her contribution. A package wrapped in orange paper because that had been Mia's only stated preference for birthday aesthetics. Mia took the package with ceremony. "Can I open it now?" "It's your birthday," Sienna said. "You can do what you want." Mia opened it with moderate restraint, which took about 12 seconds. Inside was a field guide to birds of North America. The good one, the one with the detailed illustrations and the range maps and the behavioral notes, and a small, durable pair of child-sized binoculars. Mia looked at them for a moment. "We talked about the hawk," Sienna said, "back in March, outside the workforce center. You asked why it was circling, and I didn't know the answer." Mia looked up. "You remembered that?" "I looked it up after," Sienna said. It was a red-tailed hawk. They circle like that when they're hunting. They can see things from up high that are invisible from the ground. Mia held the binoculars with both hands. I want to find one, she said. I know a park, Sienna said. We can go. Mia nodded with the gravity of someone entering a formal agreement. Logan had been watching this from the doorway. His mother appeared beside him and said nothing, just stood there, and he felt her absorb the scene with the particular attention of a woman evaluating something important. Okay, his mother said quietly. Just that. The party was what parties with 7-year-olds always are. Slightly chaotic, louder than predicted, briefly involving a balloon-related conflict that resolved itself within 4 minutes, and generally more successful than the planning suggested it would be. Mrs. Cantu brought food. Logan's mother brought food. Logan had made food. There was significantly more food than 7 children and 6 adults required, which Mia had anticipated and approved of in advance. James brought a soccer ball, because he'd known Mia for 2 years and had determined soccer ball was the universal gift. Mia's school friends consumed cake with the focused efficiency of children who understand their priorities. Logan's mother found herself seated next to Sienna at some point in the mid-afternoon, the two of them at the folding table with plates, while the children did something involving the soccer ball that had no discernible rules but significant energy. He wasn't close enough to hear what they said. He saw his mother ask something and Sienna answer it, and he saw his mother nod, the specific nod she used when she was deciding something. And he saw Sienna smile, not the deployed smile from the gala, the actual one that showed up when she wasn't monitoring herself. He didn't ask either of them about it later. Some conversations belonged to the people who had them. As the afternoon thinned and the guests drifted home, and Mia wound down by approximately 40%, still present, still verbal, but at a reduced operational capacity, Logan found himself in the backyard in the late afternoon light, the October sun going orange and low. Sienna was beside him. They were both watching Mia, who was showing Mrs. Cantu something about the binoculars with considerable technical detail. Your mom is extraordinary, Sienna said. She is. She told me something, Sienna paused. She said that you're the best thing your family ever made. A pause. She said it like it was just a fact, not a compliment. Logan looked at Mia for a long moment. She's biased, he said. Probably, Sienna said. Doesn't mean she's wrong. He turned to look at her. This woman beside him in the October light, who had come to his daughter's 7th birthday with a field guide and binoculars because she'd remembered a passing question about a hawk from 8 months ago, who had sat on his kitchen floor and stood at clinic windows and held a boardroom, and come through the other side of all of it, and was still, after everything, here. He'd been carrying the ring for 3 weeks. That was not how he would have described the plan, because there hadn't been a plan exactly. There'd been a morning in September when he'd walked past a jewelry shop on his way to a meeting and stopped, and gone in, and stood at the case for 20 minutes asking questions of a patient salesperson, and walked out with a small box in his jacket pocket. He told himself he wasn't going to force a moment. He was going to wait until it was real. This was real. He reached into his jacket pocket. Hey, he said. She turned. He didn't go down on one knee because the concrete was cold and he had a bad knee from a running injury 2 years ago, and Sienna would find the theatrics more awkward than meaningful. He just stood there and opened the box. The ring was simple. He'd chosen it for exactly that reason. She didn't need ornament. She needed a thing that lasted. Her face did something he'd never seen it do. Not in the gala, not at the hospital, not in the boardroom, something completely undefended. Logan, she said. You fit here, he said. You said nobody ever told you that. I want to make it permanent, the telling. Mia had turned around because Mia missed nothing, and she was watching from across the backyard with Mrs. Cantu's hand on her shoulder, both of them entirely still. Sienna looked at the ring, at him, at Mia. I've been failing at ordinary my whole life, she said. Her voice was slightly unsteady, which she didn't try to fix. I didn't understand it was the point. I know, he said. I'm still not going to be easy. I know that too. I'm going to overfunction sometimes. I'm going to try to fix things I should ask about first. And I'm going to be too rigid and take things too seriously and expect more than I should from a regular Tuesday. She almost laughed. came out somewhere between a laugh and something else. "Yes," she said. "Yes, you'll be difficult, or yes, you'll marry me." "Both," she said. "Obviously both." He put the ring on her finger. It fit because he'd asked Mrs. Cantu to find out her size, which Mrs. Cantu had accomplished through means she refused to disclose and seemed proud of. Mia covered the backyard in approximately 4 seconds. She didn't say anything. She just put her arms around both of them, one on each side, and held on with the specific force of a 7-year-old who has decided something is hers to protect. Logan looked at Sienna over the top of Mia's head. Sienna looked back. Neat. Here is what nobody tells you about the kind of love that arrives late and sideways. The kind that finds you when you've already built a life and decided you were fine. It doesn't complete you. The people in the stories always say that someone completed them, filled the missing piece, made them whole. That's not how it works. What actually happens is simpler and harder. You're already whole, both of you, and so is the other person. You're two complete, complicated, imperfect human beings with your own histories and your own wounds and your own ways of breaking things by accident. And you choose each other anyway, not because you need each other to function, but because the world is easier to inhabit when you're inhabiting it toward the same direction. Sienna had spent 8 years building something extraordinary by refusing to need anything she couldn't provide herself. She'd been so good at it that she'd almost made it permanent, almost hollowed out the part of herself that could receive as well as give. Logan had spent 4 years holding a life together through the specific discipline of someone who knows exactly what matters and refuses to let it slip. He'd built something real inside loss, which is the hardest kind of building. Neither of them arrived at the backyard on Garfield Street in October without damage. They both came with the full inventory of who they were, the failures and the stubbornness, and the places where they'd have to work harder than they wanted to, every day, for as long as it lasted. That's the true thing about it. Not the ring, not the moment, not the birthday afternoon with the orange October light. The true thing is that they both knew what it would cost and chose it with their eyes open. Mia grew up knowing that families are not born, they are built. From intention, from showing up, from the choice you make on an ordinary Tuesday when staying is harder than leaving. Sienna learned what it meant to let a place hold you instead of running it. Logan learned that loving someone new doesn't diminish the people you've already loved. It extends the territory. It makes the map larger. And somewhere in the city, in a small apartment that smelled like coffee, an old newspaper, and the basil plant on the windowsill that got overwatered sometimes, in a backyard where tomatoes grew in pots along the south wall, and a 7-year-old practiced lateral movement on weekend mornings, the three of them built the kind of ordinary that takes years to find and a whole life to keep. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. And that, in the end, was everything.